Okay, so creating work breakdown structure, WBS, is the process of subdividing the project scope, subdividing the project deliverables, and the work required to deliver on the deliverables into smaller, more manageable components called work packages. Why do we need to divide into smaller, more manageable components? This is because when the components are small, it is easy to manage them. It is easy to estimate the time it will take. It is easy to estimate the amount it will cost. It can be easily controlled. For example, if I were to ask how much will it cost to be able to build a 100-story building, you can't answer that question. But if I were to ask how much will it cost to rebuild a side of a wall, a side of a building, of a room, that's small enough. You can easily conceptualize how many blocks do I need. Maybe I need some, maybe like half a bag of cement. Okay, I also need some small sand. I also need some small this. So it's easy for you to tell me, okay, I'll be needing $200. Okay, I'll be needing 5 days. Okay, I'll be requiring this amount of resources. So it's easier when it's smaller. And it's so difficult and nearly impossible when it is so big. So that's the reason why the work breakdown structure is telling you that break down the scope, the deliverables and the work required to create the deliverables. Break everything down into components. Break those components into sub-components. You keep breaking down until you have gotten to a level that is small enough that you can deal with directly. So the lowest level of your WBS is called the work package. So any decomposition, so this process of breaking down is called decomposition. Once you have gotten to the level of work packages, any decomposition after there is now going into activity list. So we'll discuss this when we get to schedule management. So we break down the scope, we keep breaking, we keep decomposing till we get to work package. So what is a work package? The work package is the lowest level of your WBS, work breakdown structure. At what point would you stop decomposing? You would stop decomposing when you get to a level that you feel, okay, this unit, this sub component is small enough to handle, small enough to manage, small enough to control. Your WBS is critical to project success. The WBS is a very important project document. Why? It is very important because a lot of important, this WBS is a critical input to so many processes. If your WBS is done poorly, all the other dependent processes would also inherit the errors. It just cascades down. So your cost estimating, your cost budgeting, your resource planning, activity definition, risk planning, even communications planning, and many more, procurement. All of these things are picking directly from your WBS. Errors in WBS would automatically reflect in those areas. There's something called the 100% rule. Whatever is in the scope of the project must be captured in the WBS. Whatever is not in the scope of the project must not be in the WBS. So that's the 100% rule. If not in scope, it can be in WBS. If it is in the WBS, it must be in the scope. So that's the 100% rule. So the WBS must be a 100%. It must encompass all of the scope 100% and nothing more. And nothing more. So we have our scope baseline. At this point in time that we have created our WBS, then we have what we call a scope baseline. The scope baseline is a combination of 3 documents. You have your project scope statement, which is essentially the scope that we created when we defined scope. then the WBS you are creating now, and then a third document called your WBS dictionary. These three documents come together to form the scope baseline for the project. What's the WBS dictionary? We'll discuss this shortly. Okay, this is an example of a WBS. So you have the whole project broken into 4 components, and then component number 2 is broken further into 5 components, and then you have further breaking, and then you have further breaking, and then you have further breaking down. So the lowest levels are called work packages. This is another example. This is how a WBS actually looks. This is a breaking down, decomposition for a software project. So the whole work to create deliverables, the whole work to be able to deliver the project according to the scope of the project have been divided into 4. Number 1 is project management aspect of the work, technical design aspect of the work, training aspect of the work, testing aspect of the work. So the project management aspect is further decomposed into 8, and then one of those 8 are further decomposed into 2, and so that's how the decomposition goes round. So you can also note something about how those boxes are labeled. The main one on top, you have 1, which could be 1.0, and then 1.0 is decomposed into 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. 1.1 is now further decomposed into 1.1.1, 1.1.2, 1.1.3, down to 1.1.8. Then 1.1.8 is further decomposed into 1.1.8.1 and 1.1.8.2. So this is how the WBS boxes are labeled. They are given codes. So and then after the code, you just have a short phrase or description. This is where the WBS dictionary comes in. The WBS dictionary now comes to give more details. It's like a reference, like a dictionary actually. You know, when you want to get the meaning of words, you go and look for that word in the dictionary and you read the description. So if you want to know, for example, look at 1.2.1, feasibility assessment. What does it mean? You can't know what it means. You cannot put all the details inside this diagram. So you just look for 1.2.1. You go and look for 1.2.1 inside your WBS dictionary. That now gives you lots more detail about the deliverable, lots more detail about this box. And if it's a work package, a lot more detail about the work package. The composition is the subdivision of deliverables into smaller, more manageable components until decomposition is the subdivision of deliverables into smaller, more manageable components until they are defined to the work package level. And how do we know when we get to the work package level? It's that level in which the schedule and cost and resource and other things for that component or for that work package can be easily estimated. And you have to avoid going down to a level wherein it's no longer worthwhile. So break things down, but until it's simple, but don't break down further, then it becomes a mess. So the composition may be difficult for work to be done far in the future. So the team does really wave planning. What this means essentially is that because we are not God, it will be difficult for us to be able to decompose some things that we really don't have so much information about, or it is so far from now to be done that there's so much of uncertainty about how it will be broken down. It's okay. Break down to the extent of what you know, or to the extent that you can go. As you move on the project, you would know more, you would see more, and you can can decompose even further. So that is called rolling wave planning, progressive elaboration. So there's a quote here from Albert Einstein: make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. So in the context of WBS, break your scope down and keep breaking until it's simple enough at the work package level that you can easily manage and control, but don't break down further. Okay? Our scope baseline, as said earlier, consists of your project scope statement, your WBS, and your WBS dictionary. It's just like every other baseline. It is used as a basis. Just as every other baseline, it is used as a basis for measuring performance. It's a component of your project management plan. So this is another example of your WBS. In this case now, you can see some element of costs has been introduced. So when you are doing the budgeting of your project, you come back to your WBS and you estimate costs from the work package level, and then from there you can aggregate to the top to be able to have the budget of the project. So if you look at this diagram critically, something is going on here. We're trying to show the relationship between your WBS and other planning processes. You can see that the first one here is collect requirements, and then you define your scope, and then you create your WBS. So from the WBS that you have created, a lot of other planning processes are dependent, either directly or dependent on other processes that are dependent on your WBS. So as we proceed in this training, we'll keep coming back to this diagram to see how the processes are flowing out of what they are getting from the WBS. So if your WBS is not properly defined, the knowledge areas that are picking from it are directly, adversely impacted. So other than the WBS, there are some other breakdown structures. We'll get to know more about them when we get to knowledge areas that relate to them. You have the OBS, organizational breakdown structure. This is more like an organogram, like a chart. You have the risk breakdown structure. You have the resource breakdown structure, and then you have something called the bill of material. When we get to the respective knowledge areas, we'll discuss them. Please note that the structure of the WBS should reflect the way the project will be performed and managed. So you don't just draw it in an haphazard way. This way you want to manage the project should reflect in the structure of your WBS. The WBS should be broken down to the level of detail needed to be able to provide control on the work. And then we gave this heuristic figure, maybe 80 hours or the work that you require 2 weeks of work. Like I said, not cast on stone. A smart project manager would know that they need to manage the project from the pieces and not the whole project at once. Remember, never manage a big thing as a big thing. Always break things down. When you have broken things down, you manage from the pieces. Nothing is particularly hard if you can divide into small jobs. Don't try to manage a big thing directly. Divide it into small jobs and manage from the pieces. That's what this point is telling us here. Each element of the WBS should be given a unique identifier that codes its position in the WBS and then also shows the relationship between the parents and the children to the box or to the element in the WBS. We discussed the 1.0, 1.1, 1.1.1. We discussed that earlier. So each WBS element should have an associated deliverable or set of deliverables that allow an indication of work progress and completion. What are the benefits of having a WBS on a project? Number one is that it facilitates team building. Producing the WBS facilitates team building. How? Because you are doing it together as a team. You are calling the people in charge of their components to come and break it down, and then you are deliberating together as a team, and then you are agreeing on the final structure of your WBS. So it helps team building. It focuses attention on project objectives. Whatever is not in WBS is not in the scope. Whatever is not in the scope is not in WBS. It gives you focus. You are starting off from an approved scope, and then you are breaking it down, and then you are breaking it down, and then you are breaking it down. You are breaking down what is clear into other things, and then those ones are broken down. So what it means is, at no point in time are you straying away from the core objective of the project. At no point are you straying away from the contents from inside the scope. So it helps focus attention on the project objectives. So it forces detailed planning. Yes, if you approach the big thing as a big thing, there could be cases of omission. But by the time you are breaking things down and you pay right attention to it, you'll be able to manage those small bits one by one. As you are doing those things, the effort will aggregate together to mean you actually managing the whole project. It facilitates the allocation of responsibility for individual packets of work. Yes, by the time you have broken the project down into smaller pieces, then you can now start picking one chunk, assigning to people. So you can now have owners for the various work packages and tasks. So it graphically illustrates the project scope. Yes, and then it is reusable for similar projects. The WBS used on this project, at the end of your project, it becomes part of the OPAs for an organization. So what's the WBS dictionary? Just as we explained earlier, your dictionary contains more information about the content of each element of your WBS. So for example, when you see 1.2.1 on the WBS, go to your dictionary if you want to get more information about that 1.2.1. Each component of your WBS is assigned a unique reference number, like the 1.2.1 that I mentioned. It's called code of accounts. So the information relating to each of the components is documented in the WBS dictionary. So these are some of those things you could put. So for each content, each element in WBS, you can have statement of work, plan duration, budget, responsibility, resource requirements, specification, acceptance criteria, contract information, dependencies, and much more.